Welcome to the Manager Tools podcast for Monday, July 24th, 2006. Hi everyone, this is Michael Ozan, and on behalf of Mark Horstman and myself, welcome back to Manager Tools. Today's show is an interesting one. At least once in your career, and perhaps as many as 5 times, you're going to have to resign from a position. And this is another one of those tasks or responsibilities that no one talks about, no one knows how to do, and therefore many do it poorly. Now it's not hard to do well, and in this series of casts, we make it a simple step-by-step process. Now if you're thinking that you already know how to do this, consider that we recommend you need 6 weeks to do it well. Now, as sometimes happens, when we cover something in detail, it takes more than a few minutes to cover it well. Today's show is, therefore, part 1 of 3 on this particular topic. So, with no further ado, let's get with it.
Okay, so what were you saying just a minute ago about people quitting, resigning?
Well, it's just the people get this like moral air about them,
yes,
where something happens and they want to go and resign. They want to tell, they want to tell their boss off, or they want to tell HR, or they want to do whatever. They want to vindicate themselves in some regard, so they go out and in flames. And I can't think of a single instance where that was ever useful to somebody's career or prospects or anything. And people are just silly that way. They just feel like they got to stand on some soapbox and make sure that they're exert their moral superiority.
Yeah, the sense of moral rectitude is sort of there. And yet, I think if someone does feel their ethics or values are violated, absolutely it's appropriate to resign, and it's appropriate to be strategically and tactically smart about it. And there's nothing wrong with saying, this is the moment where I decided to resign, and then actually leaving in 6 weeks. I think that's that's just the difference between making an ethical judgment and then deciding how to implement it.
Yeah, well, we've talked before. I've had that problem in the past. When I first got out of the Army and went to work for Mobil Oil, I had a boss had to sit down with me after about a year and said, "Look, you're the best team lead we've got, but until you solve this particular problem, that's all you're ever going to be."
Right.
But part of it is like I felt I was right. I still feel I was right. But this idea of getting angry and then venting to, here I was an entry-level programmer. I'm venting to VPs, telling them how messed up they are.
Yeah.
And in my anger, I felt very, very powerful. It's amazing. It's endorphins running through your body. And then, but after that momentary high is over, you're left with the mess you created.
Yes.
So being effective versus being right is, we've talked about that before.
Yes, exactly.
So it's interesting. We're having this conversation about resigning, not as a fact that we're going to talk about resigning today, but that's just part of our conversation. So we don't by taking this subject and putting it into a podcast, we certainly don't want to create an impression that we want people to resign. We're not trying to get the entire nation or world up and everybody walk into their boss's office and resign.
Right.
But it's going to happen, and it's likely that there's at least a high probability at some point in your career you'll walk in and resign. And so those who do it well look like professionals, and those who don't look like professionals.
And hurt themselves often.
And
hurt others, unfortunately. I mean, there's a big component of taking care of other people and doing this right.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think sometimes people don't think about resigning that way. They don't think about how they resign and how it's going to impact those people around, particularly their subordinates.
Yeah, and think of it this way, Mike. I mean, we talk very openly about about the company is not in charge of your career anymore. And so resignations as a function of getting out of the job are seen as a career move. And that's, well, I've got to manage my career, don't I, Mark? Didn't you say in a recent cast that, the company's not managing my career? Yes, in fact, I did. That doesn't mean that the effects of your resignation are not felt elsewhere besides your career, besides your personal life. As my brother Walt once sent me a note and said, side effects are still effects. And the fact is there are side effects of resignations. And the side effect of a resignation done the way most people do it, with the classic 2-week line, I'll give you my 2 weeks notice kind of thing, are significant. And in organizations that are as lean and as tight as they are today, I simply submit that it does great disservice to the years or even months of service you give a company to resign in a way that's less than totally professional. And it's not hard to do. There's nothing we're going to talk about in this cast that's hard or complex. Some of it is extra work, no question about it. But if you're going to shy away from extra work, I really have serious doubts about why you'd ever want to be in management to begin with.
Right.
And as I was thinking about this, Mike, it occurs to me that you and I are really classic examples of this. We both probably would have said that we were joiners, that we were people whom our parents raised to think of us as having a career in one place. But shoot, I've been in 4 different fields. I was in the Army, I was in sales at Procter, and then recruiter, and now I have my own company. And really, it's 5 when you count podcasting. And I can tell you, when I told my folks that I was leaving the Army after being a West Point graduate, I'm sure they rolled their eyes. And then when I told them it was Procter & Gamble, they're like, "Oh, that makes it okay." And then I told them I was leaving Procter & Gamble. They're like, "Well, apparently it wasn't okay after all." In your case, you were in the Army, and then you were at Mobil Oil, and then you were at MCI and at Bell Atlantic, and now the restaurants and Manager Tools.
Yeah. And the key point there was I was at MCI. I left and went to Bell Atlantic, now Verizon.
Yes.
And maybe we'll go into it at some future point in the nobody that I had an issue with is still there, but the fact is my experience there was not a positive one, and it wasn't more than 5.5 months later I was back at MCI, because I frankly loved MCI before. This is well before WorldCom, by the way, but I loved MCI, and had I not resigned in a manner that was professional, what do you think the chances are of me ever going back to MCI? And so I was just based upon the way I did it, I was able to go back to MCI, the place that I loved at the time, and thank God I had that opportunity, because I tell you what, I was absolutely miserable at Bell Atlantic.
Yeah,
I can say that.
I can remember it.
Yeah.
And if my recollection is correct, that while you did your resignation reasonably well at MCI, there were some touchy moments going back, and there were some costs extracted from you as a function of your leaving.
Oh yeah, I was the poster child in terms of don't leave.
Yeah,
you'll want to come back.
Right. So that's a future cast. There's no question about it. So the question really for these, actually what we now know to be a series of casts, to start out this is our first cast in year 2, and it's going to be a multiple part cast. How do you resign professionally? How do you do it the Manager Tools way? And there are 3 major phases you're going to go through: preparation, delivery, and then interim actions. Interim being from the moment you resign to the time where you leave the organization. So, should we get started with phase 1, preparation?
Let's do it.
Okay. Believe it or not, what most people worry about, Mike, in resigning is the delivery. What do I say? How do I say it? If they're smart enough to ask that. But preparation is the most important phase in making your resignation, your transition. And really, you got to be careful about thinking of it just as a resignation. It's not the end of your career, your life. It's a transition. It's the most important phase in making this whole process successful. The delivery phase is what everybody thinks about, and that's the most important in terms of avoiding failure. But as I think we've said a bunch of times on this cast, avoiding failure is not the same thing as seeking success. And in order to be successful, you must not only deliver well, you have to do the preparation in advance of it well. if you do this preparation phase right, and we've got a series of steps, must be 12 of them, the rest just feels easier. It's in the prep that you lay your groundwork for success. We'll talk in some other cast about how to resign under pressure, how to do that, because you'll often be provided that opportunity, and that's a totally separate situation. We'll do that separately. And I don't care if you're listening now and you think, well, I would never do that because I'm the best manager on the planet or near to be the best manager on the planet. God bless you. That's great. But you need to know how to do that too, because you may work someday for the worst boss on the planet. And if you're the best and he or she is the worst, you may end up getting handed your hat. So what we're talking about here is when you have time to prepare, what do you need to do in terms of preparation? Let's give a high-level overview, Mike, of the first phase, and then we'll go through more detail. First of all, you need 6 weeks. You heard me, folks, 6 weeks. You need 6 weeks of cash. You need to make sure you get the other job first. And we'll touch on a little bit of recruiting details here in just a little bit. You have to assume, as you start the process, that you will lose access to everything electronic, and for that matter, all files, immediately the moment you speak to your boss. Many people miss that step. You can reasonably expect to be allowed to copy some things. We're going to ask that you prepare. We're going to recommend you prepare a transition file. The first thing in it is a key project report. You're going to prepare for performance files on your team and write interim reviews on your team. It may be painful, but it is the right thing to do. You're going to prepare instructions for your absence. You're going to prepare a one-page interim successor document. By now, Mike, I know we're losing people, but this is still the right way.
I know they're going like, oh my God, I'm never going to resign.
Yeah, that's right. And if you don't resign, the beauty of that is you never lose the goodwill that you're building up in your company, assuming it is goodwill. You're going to want to make lunch appointments with friends and colleagues you want to stay in touch with without telling them why you're doing it. And lastly, the last step in preparation is you will tell no one. I say again, no one. Okay, so that's the high level. I think there actually are 12 of those steps. And let's go through each one of them in more detail.
Good. Okay, 6 weeks. I think everybody's like rebelling already. Why 6 weeks?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you know what they say. I mean, if I asked 100 people, Mike, how many of those 100 do you think, if you said how much time do you need to give notice to your boss on something, how many of them would say 2 weeks?
Oh, the vast majority.
Yeah.
80% of them.
I would say 90, 95, and maybe up to 98 after the Hugh Grant, Sandra Bullock movie called 2 Weeks Notice. I mean, it's a pop culture phrase, 2 weeks notice, right? You know what?
Right.
That's for everybody. That's for hourly employees. It's for union employees. It is not for professional managers. You are the part of the leadership and management team of an organization, whether your organization is 3 people or 500 or 10,000 or 100,000. You're a part of the organization's leadership, and when you leave, there is an impact. Otherwise, they're paying you too much.
And if you don't think there's an impact when you leave, then you probably should resign.
Yeah.
Because you're not doing
you're not doing a heck of a lot. So when we say 6 weeks, what we mean is you need to be generous to the organization by allowing for 4 weeks of transition once you talk to your boss. This is just what unselfish professionals do. For those of you who are wondering, you absolutely can get that much time to wait once you accept an offer. You can say, I'm sorry, but I have, I need 6 weeks before I can start. Because when you explain to them that you need to professionally extricate yourself from your present situation and tell them several of these things on this list, they'll raise their eyebrows and go, wow, this guy, this young lady, this person really knows what they're doing. So you need 4 weeks once your boss knows, or you need to provide as much as 4 weeks. And then you need 2 weeks to get ready to actually tell your boss, because there's 2 weeks worth of preparation. And it's not trivial preparation. It's not something you can do in 15 minutes every day. Because we're assuming that you're not doing this